For her 9-month shoot, we decided to take a little trip to the park. I know I say this every time, but I am so excited to share this shoot with you. Piper is getting so big. She has one little tooth and she's starting to walk around, which is absolutely crazy, but it's so much fun. For this shoot, I'm going to be breaking out my telephoto lens. I'll also be going into a little bit more depth about shutter speeds, and we're also going to discover and play with one of my all-time favorite light sources, which is backlight. Before we get into the shoot, I just want to talk a little bit about shutter speeds. When you click the button to take a picture, the shutter opens. So the amount of time that it is open to capture the photograph is the shutter speed. Most shutter speeds that you will be shooting with will be 1 over a number, because it's basically a fraction of a second. So you'll see shutter speeds such as 1 over 1/25, 1 over 500, and so on. A good starting point to find a shutter speed is you definitely want to have a shutter speed that is double the focal length of your lens. So if you're shooting with a 50mm, I would recommend shooting at least 1/100th of a second. If you're shooting at a shutter speed that is too slow, you'll get a lot of camera movement and you just won't be able to capture that crisp, really in-focus image. The longer your lens is, the faster your shutter speed needs to be. However, because most of us are shooting people, babies, kids, families, whatever it may be, I really don't like to shoot any slower than 1/250th of a second. Because a lot of times if you're shooting slower than that, you won't be able to freeze just the natural movements that people have, blinking, swaying, whatever it may be. So just to be safe, I like to start at 1/250th of a second and get faster from there if I need to. And because we're going to be at the park, there's going to be a lot of swinging and a lot of action. So I'm going to talk about different shutter speeds that I use to freeze action. Piper loves to swing. And I think most babies do. And I knew this would be the perfect thing to do to get those natural smiles and giggles. And I knew she would have so much fun. And it's actually something that we do a lot, so that's another reason why I wanted to document it. I thought my telephoto lens would be the perfect lens to use for this shoot. And I thought that for a variety of reasons, but the main reason I thought that is parks can be crowded. There's a lot going on. There's a lot of kids and babies and, people running around. So a telephoto lens really gives you the freedom to kind of step back and let the action, kind of unfold before you. And you're able to really just zoom in on your subject. You can take away all the clutter, you can crop out people, and you can really just focus on your subject.
Yeah.
This telephoto lens came in so handy when I was shooting these swing shots also, because I wanted to be able to blur the background. I wanted Piper and the swing to just pop out, and I wanted it to be all about them. I didn't want any background clutter. I didn't even want the background to be a part of it. What the telephoto lens does is it allows you to get it further away from your subject. The further away from your subject that you are, the more you can blur the background behind them. The telephoto that I was using was a 70-200 2.8 lens. So I actually never changed my f-stop from the 2.8. All I did was change my shutter speed depending on what the light was doing. These first shots where she was swinging, I wanted to make sure to freeze that action. I wanted it to be crisp and in focus. So what I did is I shot at 1/1000th of a second. Another little trick that I do when I'm shooting motion, for instance, when Piper was swinging back and forth, what I try to do is I try to mimic it with my body and the camera. So as she's moving forward and backward, I'm doing the same thing with the camera. And what happens is when she reaches the height of that swing, or she reaches, the furthest part of her swing, I can catch her in that split second where she kind of stops for a moment. So as she swings back, I click, 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 and I just keep doing that until I get the shot that I want. Another reason I was loving the telephoto for this particular shoot was the further back you can get from, kind of the action that's happening, the smaller that action gets. So as I stood back, the swinging motion got smaller. Even though she was still moving, I was still getting the smiles and the giggles, but it wasn't, the movement wasn't so great that it was hard to capture. I absolutely adore these grandparent shots that we got. I'm always trying to incorporate things that we really do in our everyday life, and I want to incorporate people that we love, because it really just takes the image kind of to another emotional level. And I really want Piper to be able to look back someday and remember this time that she had with her grandparents, because she's probably not, actually going to remember it, but I want her to be able to see it. Another reason I absolutely love these series of shots is I found the perfect backlight. Backlight is one of those things I'm always looking for. I really feel like it takes images kind of to another level. I love the way the backlight highlights, kind of gives them a halo. It's a very angelic, soft, just very emotional feel to the image. When I'm trying to find the perfect backlight, I don't want light that's coming directly into my camera lens. So I definitely want the light coming in a little bit higher than my lens, because if it shoots right into the lens, you have a whole world of problems to worry about. So the light that was coming in behind them was coming through some trees, and so it was really soft, and it just kind of laid right on top of them. So the light on their face actually didn't change at all from the previous spot where I was on the swings. So I left my exposure the same. So the highlight that was hitting their head blew out, and that's what created the really high key effect. And that is why I really recommend shooting in manual. If I was shooting in program mode or aperture priority, what would have happened is the camera would have taken into effect the highlight that was hitting their head, and their faces would have turned out dark. So always shoot in manual if you can. You have so much more control of the image.
Good girl! Piper! Maybe do the walk again with her for this one?
Let's walk. 1, 2, 1 at the edge.
Bring some things that they love to play with to the park. Piper loves this walker, so I thought this would be a great thing to bring to just let her play with. I knew there would be big smiles, and I also knew that there would be a lot of motion. For these shots, I was shooting in nice, beautiful open shade. It was light and bright, and I had plenty of room to capture the motion of her moving. I love being able to freeze in time those tiny little steps. My shutter speed for this portion came in at 1/1250th of a second. There's nothing like a park bench to get a perfect portrait of daddy and daughter, and that's actually one of the reasons that I picked this park, is I knew there would be tons of things to utilize in the photos. There were benches and logs and swings and pathways, and I just wanted to make it easy on myself. So do yourself a favor. When you're picking a spot to do a shoot, make sure there's a variety of things that you can utilize. This helps create so many more images, it gives you variety, and you don't have to work that hard to get it. I'm still shooting in that nice open shade. I barely had to change my exposure from the previous series of shots. So it's probably almost guaranteed that at some point, your cute, tiny little subject will start getting tired, hungry, cranky, whatever it may be. So when my subject starts doing this, what I like to do is I want to give them something to have in their hands. I saw this huge tree and tons of leaves on the ground, and I know Piper is absolutely just enamored with leaves. She just loves them to death. So I knew if I set her down in those leaves and just let her play with them, just kind of let her go, let her look at them, hold them in her hand, and I was able to step back. I had my telephoto lens on, so I really stepped back from the action and I just kind of let her do her thing. So when you do this, you're not going to get as many shots of them looking right into the camera, but that's okay. You don't want every shot to be them looking into the camera. As you can see, our pet octopus from the 6-month shoot has now been traded in for a dog with one eye. But hey, whatever makes her smile. Giving them something to play with in their hands really gives you some extra time. It keeps them still, it keeps them engaged, and you're able to keep taking photos. This telephoto lens was the perfect lens to have on for this particular series. I really was pretty far back from her, so she wasn't distracted by the camera. She was totally into what she was doing, looking at the leaves, and it was exactly the images that I wanted to create. I wanted her to be into the leaves, but not looking at me. I was still shooting in that beautiful open shade, and this park was absolutely full of it. If you're wanting to learn more about how to find that perfect open shade, be sure to watch Piper's 6-month video. All babies love to move, and Piper's no exception. So for this next shot, I thought it would be fun to have Mark hold Piper over his shoulder, and he was gonna take a little jog with her. But she was gonna be looking back towards me. But what I decided to make it easier on myself, instead of trying to capture her moving away from me, I actually ran along behind them. So we still got the laughing and the effect of the motion of them running, but I was actually running too, so it was a lot easier to focus on her. I found that it was actually easier to focus on her while I was running than to try to focus on a moving subject. And I know that sounds like it might be a little bit difficult, but it actually really made her laugh too, because I was kind of chasing them. And so it just created some really fun images. You're probably gonna take some images that aren't that great. I do it all the time. How will you ever know the gems if you don't take some bad ones in the mix? It just helps you learn, and it helps you to really know what a good photograph is. Definitely breaking the rules with this shot, all the way. So it was really, really bright behind them. And some of the backlight was flooding into the camera a little bit, but I still wanted to expose for their face, which didn't have any of the bright light on it. So I was shooting at 1/640th of a second at 2.8. And what that did was it kind of flooded the photo a little bit because that light behind them was so bright, it just kind of blew out at 1/640th of a second. And I do want to add, I was still shooting with my 50mm. If I would have been shooting with my telephoto lens, 70-200, I probably wouldn't have been able to actually capture this image because the backlight was just too strong. And we ended with just a really sweet shot of Piper walking between her grandparents, holding their hands, and she can't quite walk on her own yet. She loves to hold somebody's hands and walk, and I really thought it would be the perfect way to end the shoot. So I just want to summarize what we learned today. So we talked a lot about the telephoto lens. What makes them so great and useful? Number one thing, they're great for crowded places. They're easy to zoom in. You can, eliminate a lot of clutter. You can cut out people. They're great for parks, beaches, places where you actually have room to get back and, can really zoom in on your subject. It allows you to really blur the background. The further you are from your subject, the more background blur you can get. It also really allows you to capture motion, because what it does is when you're moving back from your subject, the motion becomes smaller and it becomes less of an issue and it becomes easier to capture. We also talked about shutter speeds. Remember, you want to make sure that your shutter speed is at least double the amount of the focal length of your lens. So if you're shooting a 200mm, you want to definitely be shooting at least 1/400th of a second. This will help ensure that you don't have camera movement and you'll just get a nice crisp image. When you're shooting people, babies, families, kids, whatever it may be, I really recommend starting at least at 1/250th of a second and getting faster from there if you need to. When shooting and capturing motion, the faster the shutter speed, the better. We also discovered some backlight in this series, which is so fabulous. Remember, when you're trying to find the perfect backlight, you don't want the light coming directly into your lens. It will cause a world of problems. So try to find backlight that's just a little bit higher than the camera lens. Try to find a naturally diffused backlight if you can. Light is so beautiful, sifting through trees or clouds, or something that will soften the nature of the light. If you can't, if you're shooting with a direct sunlight behind somebody, try to make sure that it's a softer direct sunlight, like sunset. Remember, when you're shooting backlight, even though there's a strong highlight on the head or behind them, always expose for the face. And so that goes directly into my next point. Shooting in manual will make this so much easier on you. It gives you the control and the freedom that you need to make the images that you want to make.